Today, we have 4 panelists with us: Aditya Dongre, Shamita Suresh Kumar, Kavish Shetty, and Rupal MS. I invite Aditya to start the conversation.
Good evening, sir. I am Aditya Dongre of Class 9 IGCSE. It is always a pleasure to have you in our midst. We have all heard your views and ideas on COVID-19. There are many valid points and ideas that we can take from it. As you are aware, many nations have entered the second phase of lockdown, which means rules have been relaxed, businesses have reopened, and the public has been allowed to intermingle. But this has caused worry of a possible resurgence of the virus, with many experts warning of a second wave. You said that society as a whole has to contribute and each of us has to become a frontline warrior in the fight against the pandemic. So, what can the student community do to create awareness in the community about safety measures during phase 2?
Oh, that's a tough question. So, now, first of all, let me say this. Yes, I mean, there is always a big challenge for anyone to make a decision between how much to open and when. So how much risk can you take? Because on the one hand, you can keep everyone locked down, but completely destroy your economy, destroy the educational year of the students, and much more. And maybe even postpone the problem of pandemic for another time while you are growing your economy. So all governments have to make some very difficult choices, and they are doing it in their own ways, taking into account their local circumstances. Now we're here in Singapore and everywhere else, people are opening up, it's a really refreshing sign. But the risk of pandemic, of a second wave remains, and everyone talks about it. Prime Minister Lee said that in his speech about that it's a tricky and a difficult disease, tricky and difficult. What I would say the students can do is, first of all, they themselves have to observe every instruction on safe distancing, hygiene, and other social measures in school and at home, and on their way from school to home and back, with your friends, or just going out to play sports together. But remember that it's far more important to be able to stave off, to keep off the disease, than to go out, play for one day and then fall sick and make others sick as well. So you bear a responsibility not just to yourself and to your family, but to all the other students who study with you. So I know that your sports are disrupted, your classes are disrupted, your social engagements are disrupted. But you need to be resilient, you need to be strong, you need to be patient and persevere in this effort till a vaccine is found, or we can say with safety that we will not be affected by the virus. Fortunately, your generation is so good at social media that you probably can at least interact with them and stay emotionally connected. It is never a substitute for physical, but that's what you must do. Second, you must continue to advise even your parents, your other relatives and people in your community that please wear a mask when you step out. Please maintain safe distances. Please observe all hygiene instructions. Use sanitizers, wash your hands all the time, clean your surfaces, and do everything that the government prescribes. Because you see, parents listen to their children far more than you imagine. And therefore, if you tell them, then they would also be careful. So I think, and the second thing is focus on your studies, even in these difficult circumstances. So I know it's not easy to have to adjust. When adults find it hard, children will find it harder. But adjust to it, because even in these circumstances, your goals must remain clear and you must continue to pursue them despite all these temporary challenges. A year later from now, maybe a year and a half from now, all this will be behind us and we'll be going back to doing the things we always liked doing, going out to watch a movie, going out to play, maybe going out for a concert, and all the wonderful things that we like doing. But in the meantime, stay strong, stay safe, be patient, and accept the situation, and don't feel upset about it.
That is certainly sound advice, Your Excellency. I think I speak for the audience here when I say that we will try our level best to execute those ideas. Thank you.
Hello, sir. I'm Shamita Suresh Kumar. I'm a first-year student of IB. I agree with you when you said the sense of us versus them is pronounced in this era, and we need social empathy even more. COVID-19 has had an adverse impact on various segments of our society. The hardest hit among them were the lower strata of the society, comprising migrant workers. Many were quarantined, which affected their livelihood. You observed that they faced social, economical, and mental challenges as a result. In the past, students and teachers posted a lot of videos to boost the morale of this community and to reach out to them to show them they're not alone. I'm sure the High Commission of India also did a lot to engage with them and reassure them in every way. Going forward, is there a way students and teachers can work with the High Commission to help out migrant workers?
It's a good question. I think more than us, I think, we should work with the Ministry of Manpower and the Migrant Workers Center, which has been set up by the Ministry of Manpower. Now, why do I say this? I say this because, as you see, the migrant workers living in dormitories include workers from not just India, but also from Bangladesh, Myanmar, China, Vietnam, and other countries. We should not give the impression that we're only concerned about Indian migrant workers. We should be concerned about all of them. And which is why when many organizations approached us in the past 2 months, that why can't we work to do something for the migrant workers? I would say that, look, I'd like you to go to, there are many NGOs who do it, but for the sake of, neutrality, we said, at least let's work with the non-government organizations set up by the Ministry of Manpower, which is the Migrant Workers Center, which is associated with them. So we directed the organizations to them to see how they could work. And it would not be a good idea to discriminate between those who come from India and those who come from Bangladesh or from other places. Now, so we'd be happy to connect you to students to the Migrant Workers Center. They'd absolutely love your initiative. This is a great thing for you to think of and to do, and for the entire school student community to want to help the migrant workers. And remember that, there are different, and it's best to ask what they need rather than, it's not always material things. As you said rightly, just talking to them, sending them video messages that we think of you. There's nothing more valuable to a person than that someone is thinking of them beyond their own work. It gives you a sense of importance, a sense of belonging, a sense of identity. So all of this is very important. And so I'd say that, we'd be happy to work with you. And we, on our part, also work with the Ministry of Manpower. Because we resisted the temptation to say, okay, here are my Indian workers. I said, of course, we will look after them if you ask us to send them back or to give them accommodation, to give them shelter, to give them food, because they are our responsibility as Indian citizens. Right. But we always went by the guidance of Ministry of Manpower. Because Singapore government said, remember what Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong said. He said Singapore will treat migrant workers the same way as we would treat our own citizens. Right? It's a great thing to say. How many countries would you find the head of the government saying, I would treat foreign workers who are living in my country the same way as I would treat my own citizens, right? So the Singapore government wanted to be in the forefront. We didn't want to give them the impression we don't trust you and we'll do our own thing. And we also tried to work with them without distinction between Indian and other workers. We had an equally strong message for workers from the others, and they appreciated it. So as GIIS in Singapore, you should be working with the local organizations for the entire migrant workers community, not just those who are from India. We all have our empathy with those who are from our country, that inculcate here the value that we belong to the entire society.
Thank you, sir, for your valuable suggestions. These small deeds of kindness will certainly uplift the morale of these people during these trying times.
Exactly. No, and I'm glad you're all doing so much for them. So it's really, really very, very heartwarming to hear this.
Hello, sir. I'm Kavish Shetty. I too am a year one student of IB. I have been listening to your speech intently. You pointed out that many contributed in their own little ways to help out during circuit breaker conditions, ringing temple bells, clapping in appreciation for frontline workers, etc. Frankly, COVID-19 has been a wake-up call for everyone around the world for a number of reasons. We learned tough lessons on cleanliness, on kindness, on mutual respect, and more importantly, on extending help to one another. But other than that, what are the takeaways from a situation like this, and which will help us sail through future challenges that we may encounter?
It's a very, very good question, very thoughtful question. So, of course, we've all seen what we can do at our micro level. There are a number of takeaways from this. Let me go it step by step. One, of course, is at the national level. We do all need to make or work towards a more equitable society. I mean, you've seen that, as one of your colleagues said, when the world stops and work ceases, the workers and the poor are the worst hit, right? And we've seen that across the world. So we have to pursue a world that is more equitable, more just, and more inclusive, and where there are opportunities for everyone. Second, we have to have human beings at the center of our development. It is not enough to pursue growth. We say, okay, let's have an 8% growth or a 7% growth or a 10% growth. But we see, what does it mean for human beings? What does it mean for my people in terms of their lives? You can have a statistical growth rate of 8% in which 10% of the population grow at 20% and the rest of the population see incomes growing at 2% or something. And then you still have a good average of 7, 8%. So how do you make human beings, bring human beings at the center of our development objectives? Third is the absolute importance of taking care of the basics: healthcare, education, sanitation, right? Cleanliness, hygiene conditions, habitat. These are the ingredients that build resilience in society. See, Singapore has had a mortality rate of 0.1%, maybe the lowest in the world. But yet it has, one of the oldest populations. So how has that been possible, that it has so low mortality rate? Because of the conditions it has created, right? Then at the national level and at the community level, we have to make sure that we are prepared for pandemics, for disasters of any kind. You can have natural disasters which can be just as severe. So what is our response system? What is our mechanism? See, Singapore drew the right lessons from SARS, and therefore it was better prepared. At the international level also, there is a lot of things that the world needs to do. The one takeaway from here is that there was absence of global leadership. You didn't see anyone taking the lead and saying, this is a global problem and we need a global solution to this. Each country fell back on itself for me and myself. That doesn't help. It is the absence of leadership. It is the absence of collective action which actually makes the problem worse. I mean, countries were holding on to their medical supplies. Countries were shutting down borders at short notices. There was very little information exchange initially. There was very little exchanges and support in terms of medical supplies and coordinated response. It slowly started picking up. And when it did, you could see what a difference it was making. Third, The takeaway is that the world still has to get back to focusing on sustainable development goals. And there is a need for much greater multilateral coordination and cooperation between countries to achieve a level of resilience in this world. When I say resilience, it means that if you'd had this pandemic and if there was, let's say, a global chain of distribution centers which had the masks, ventilators, which had medical supplies, which could be distributed to all the affected areas quickly, run by WHO as an international organization in which every country, rich and poor, had contributed, we might have had better responses. Finally, in terms of financials. Now, you've seen Singapore is a rich country. It has been wise. It had built up a big reserve of funds. So it could dip into those reserves and do something with it. I mean, provide support for families, workers, businesses. Now, majority of the countries are poor. And how does they don't have the resources to respond to this. So how does the world community come together to take care of those who are not so well endowed? Why do I say it's important? Because none of us is safe until all of us are safe. So if the infection is controlled in your country, but it is still spreading and uncontrolled in, say, country X, it can come back into your country. It will come back. Because how long are you going to keep flights banned? At some point, you'll have to allow people to travel back and forth. So it's very important. It has shown us that human beings can say what they want in terms of achievement. They've been defeated or been challenged by an invisible foe, which is as ancient as the beginning of this world. For all our progress, we have been unable to deal with a virus which is essentially primordial or ancient. And it's a problem that has existed for centuries. And we seem today as incapable of dealing with it as we were hundreds of years ago. Maybe our mortality rate is low, but the world came to a stop. So it's important to focus on what is the nature of development? What do we mean by progress? How is it that in the 21st century, when we at the cutting edge of technology, when we have wired up the entire world, we're unable to deal with an invisible foe? So a lot of thinking has to go into the direction, and every crisis is an opportunity to reshape our thinking and reshape the direction of this world and our own societies. I think this is the biggest takeaway.
Thank you, sir. That was a remarkable answer.
Good evening, sir. I'm Rupal MS of Class 9 IGCSE. We heard many touching stories from you on the situation of the people stranded in Singapore. I'm sure there were many more cases in other countries like India. It must have been a difficult situation for authorities to keep objectivity and yet not lose their human touch in such scenarios. Your Excellency, the expat community of every country has a duty towards their adopted home country to make a gainful contribution to that society. I would like you to guide us students on how we can make meaningful contributions to the country we live in our capacity as students or as part of the future workforce.
Great. I think it's a very important and a very good thought that you have. You're all living in Singapore. Many of your parents came here. Maybe some of you were born here. Some of you came here after when you were young, when you were maybe infants, and have lived here for a few or several years in Singapore. This is your home for the time being. It may become your permanent home. Some of you will acquire the citizenship. Some of you will remain permanent residents. And some of you might even go back to other places or move on to go back to India or move on to other countries for education or for work. For the time being, you are here in Singapore. You have to see this, as I was saying, as your own country, that you belong to Singaporean society, that you are able to feel for the country the way you would if you were born here or you were a citizen of this country. which means its success and failures are yours. Its triumphs and failures and its challenges are as much yours as anybody else's. And you have to constantly think of what is it that I can do to make it a better place, to make it continue on the path of progress. Now, many things, one of course we've spoken already about, is that in whatever way you can, find time to go beyond your school to make community contributions, serve the community, whether it is the spending time with the elderly or teaching skills to some of those who are unskilled, working on sustainability projects, taking care, sometimes spending free time in the home for elderly or home for the sick. There are different ways you can work in your community centers, wherever you live, participate in cultural activities, go to the Lunar New Year festivities or Mid-Autumn Festival, or to Hari Raya, or to to Hanukkah, to Christmas, wish your people. You must feel the way they feel at that point of time. So build up a culture of living in harmony, in embracing the diversity, treating everyone else equally as your own without any distinction. That's a very important part of being Singaporean. Then you have to see how you can continue to participate in activities over here. There are numerous occasions where I've seen GIIS students participate in community activities not related to your school curriculum. And that's a very good sign. Participate in the debates on what's good and what's not good for the country, what the future should be. Use it. Shouldn't say, oh, it's not, I'm just here, or it's not my country. It is, of course, your country. So if you have ideas, you want to speak to your political leadership, go and say, this is what we think should happen, as though you were speaking about your own country. In times of crisis, step outside and with your friends, like in pandemic, or if there is a natural disaster, a flood, step out of your comfort zone and try and contribute to making things better. And eventually think of a future where you say, okay, what is it that I do, whether it is in innovation, public service, whether it is in professional career, in arts and pursuit of arts and culture. Always do this not just with the purpose of what I'm doing for myself, but how does it help make my community better, as means your surroundings, and how does it make the country better. So I frankly feel that GIIS has inculcated these values in the students, and I do see them as a very enthusiastic participants, very cheerful participants in any number of activities. So continue on that path.
Thank you very much, sir.